I just finished recording with Dan Petcher, a solutions consultant for Dialpad. This one I took a little different. We didn't focus on features and benefits and speeds and feeds and the technology widgetry that comes into most IT conversations, but instead tried to maintain a dialogue around business outcomes and business drivers, in this case related to phone systems and contact centers. What was fascinating about the conversation to me is really this exploration around analytics and data, and being able to pull analytics and data and intelligence out of your interactions, whether that's a phone call or a chat or a message or, something, whether it's inside of the company or external to the company, and what you can glean from that information and how you use it. It was a fascinating conversation for myself. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, I'm Max Clark. This is an IT Broker Tech Deep Dive. I'm here with Dan Petcher, who is solutions consultant, not architect. Sorry, I was going to say architect. Solutions consultant with Dialpad. And Dialpad does a whole bunch of different stuff. So we're going to get into this in a moment here. But if you follow Gartner, Dialpad is in the UCaaS and CCaaS space and is overlaying a lot of that with artificial intelligence. But as much as I want to talk about that, Dan, I want to talk about something else first. We're going to do this a little differently. It's going to be different from the normals. Let's see here. About 6-7 years ago, I was meeting with a client, and I had to look it up because their phone system was almost as old as I. This is circa 2018-ish, and their phone system was running on a 46SX66. And it was the stereotype of you walk around the office and there's phones with like sticky notes on it, and it's like keys don't work or whatever. But here we go. We're this phone system is probably at that point been in this business for easy 20 years. And a conversation started because this phone system was having problems and going down, and they had a consultant that could come in and work on it for them in the mornings, but he could only show up at 6 a.m. in the morning and be there for 45 minutes before he went to his day job, which was not related to phones at all anymore. And I was talking with the COO of the company of basically you guys should get ahead of this stuff. At that point, we weren't calling it UCaaS yet. It was still hosted VoIP. But he said something to me that has sat with me ever since. And what he said was, we don't care about our phones. And I laugh about this because they were a phone-based sales business. They were interacting with their customers via their phones, their crews in the field via their phones, their suppliers via their phones. 100% of their business was phones. And I know this because every time their phone system went down, it was a big panic. Now, since that conversation, I've had plenty of conversations similar to that with people saying things along the lines of, effectively, we don't care about our phones, or we don't care about our phone system, or a more modern version of that being, we're just going to give everybody cell phones. And we don't need a phone system because everybody has a cell phone, and that's how we're going to work. So as somebody who is in this full time, sitting in your seat, that's the foundation of the conversation I want. So Dan, we're talking, I need a phone system, and I tell you something along the lines of like, I don't need a phone. I don't care about phones. Or I tell you something like, we're going to give everybody in our 200-person company cell phones, and we're just going to use their cell phones. There's a lot that you miss with that. And so I'm gonna stop here, and I'm just gonna let you go for a little bit, and then let's do this.
I think you stated the premise there pretty well, because they don't care about phones until they don't work. It's like, well, why did this happen, right? How do we fix this? How do we make sure they don't go down again? How do we make sure that even if they go down, we have a backup plan, or some kind of redundancy built in? And I think Dialpad, especially the way we were designed, has a lot of those things in mind. Craig Walker, very, very much from the beginning, redundancy was important, accessibility was important, being able to just have the access that you need to do your daily activities, over the phone. The cell phones can work. Obviously, it's a technology that's been around for a long time, and it's absolutely capable of handling not only your everyday phone calls, but it's a smartphone now. It can do all these other things that we had no idea was even possible, right? But I think the important thing is to continue your point. As you said, you lose a lot. You don't have visibility into everyone's activities if it's just on a cell phone. Even with the old phones that have sticky notes and are don't unplug or don't turn off, or I've seen them all, right? I used to work for several other telco companies that we had, even internally, we had phones like that. But yeah, it's the visibility, it's understanding the infrastructure, making sure that we have things in place to accommodate those situations when things happen, because things are going to happen, right? It's inevitable. But just making sure that we've got the ability to stay on top of it and make sure that business continuity is there. is extremely important.
So, I grew up in Southern California, so every few months I had to have a conversation with somebody related to the 15.0 earthquake that was going to hit and take the city, and it was just going to be ocean. But I've yet to find BCDR be real driver and behavior changes, even in the event of outages. If they're not already there, where it's like we have a priority for this, it never doesn't become a priority, right? Like you either value certain things or you just don't. And if you don't value that thing, like having an outage for a day doesn't seem to be like, oh, we should make sure our phones don't go down again, because they weren't that way in the first place. But what I kind of wonder about, and for me, it's not about like physical phones on desks. It's more about like what's the expression? It's like the job is being done, or we're getting it done, or we're getting by, and we don't know any different. And I don't get into this from like, go into a cloud-based phone system gives you, high availability or redundancy or all these different things, because, a small percentage of people actually are shopping for that, and they're aggressively out there in the market, or they've already shifted. So that's not like a driving point for somebody to make a massive technology shift or, platform change, right? It's more like I'm curious about these things that are like, if you give everybody a cell phone, they can make and receive phone calls. Okay, so like your core thing is like we can make and receive phone calls because everybody has a cell phone, but you're losing a lot without realizing that you're losing a lot. And you bring up visibility as one, which is interesting, but it's more than just visibility. There's a lot of other stuff that you lose. Yes,
absolutely. I think the phrase I was thinking of when you asked what's the phrase, it's like almost just in time, like just enough to keep things going, right? Making sure you got the phone calls, making sure you've got the ability to answer phones. It's just a basic business need, and it's again just in time. Just make sure it works, right? Just make sure that we've got something there that our salespeople, our support people can do the job. It doesn't have to be the most redundant. It doesn't have to be all the bells and whistles. But no, absolutely, it's not just visibility, but it's also the management of those individual devices. If it's all spread out, if it's everybody has their own individual cell phone, there's really no way to mass configure them to make sure that everybody's utilizing them in the same way. But then also, how do you get the personal text messages off of that cell phone, right? The individual messages that somebody might be sending that you want insight into. You don't have any way of doing that, and you're not going to have the person send you 100 screenshots of these conversations, right?
Why would you need that?
I think, what if they leave? I mean, what if the person leaves and then you lose all that contact information for that individual? Maybe they don't turn their cell phone in, or they factory reset it before you can get that information off of it, right? All of that data could be lost potentially because that person, either did it maliciously or just didn't know. You can lose that information pretty easily that way.
I don't care.
Okay.
Why is that important?
Fair
right?
Enough. I mean, I think it just.
I'm serious. I'm going to be hostile with you on this
sure.
on this topic. You signed up for this, so
yeah,
I'm going to be.
Absolutely.
I'm going to play the role here. We're going to do a little role play here. I don't care.
Okay.
Like why? What difference does that make?
Sure. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, there are segments of the business where it doesn't necessarily matter. But if it's a prospecting or a sales organization that a person has 100 conversations with about orders or about their guaranteed SLAs or anything like that, I mean it's going to be a problem if you don't have that historical data into that customer's profile, what they signed up for, what they agreed to, when they expected things. You could, if it's $100,000 order, I mean that's a good chunk of business that you could lose potentially because you don't have that information any longer. But if that doesn't matter, again, like you said, I just think having a dispersed form of communication, for lack of a better way of putting it, a non-unified communication system can be potentially damaging just because, again, you don't have that visibility into what's going on. Being able to capture that information and then make decisions about what's actually happening can change a business. And we've seen that personally here at Dialpad. We've seen companies change the way they've done business because of the information that they were able to capture.
Okay, what's an example?
I don't know how much I can name drop on a call.
Don't name drop. Just give the use case.
Absolutely. They're a customer of ours, and they utilized our contact center license, right? So they've got the transcription running, the recordings going for all of their contact center calls. And they are a high-end retailer of a specific type of footwear. And it wasn't so much the products they were offering It was the inquiries that customers were having about a product line they did not have. So they were running reports because anecdotally they were hearing stories. Reps were saying, "Oh, I think I heard this. Somebody asked me about this the other day." And I ran a sales development team a couple years ago, and things happen like that all the time. People say, "Oh, I heard this. Oh, I heard that. This might be an issue. This might be a thing." You'd have to go back and listen to the call, right? That could take an hour, depending on where that was, because you couldn't really pinpoint it. But what this company was able to do was to run a filter on all of their conversations over the last fiscal quarter, and they found over 60,000 mentions of a product that they did not offer. Their competitors did, and then basically the rep either had to say, "Oh, I can't help you with that, but here's a product we do offer," or they just say, "We don't offer that. Sorry, go to somebody else." The contact center managers took it to their executive leadership. Executive leadership said, "Wow, there's an entire market share that we're missing out on. Our customers want this. Not only is it now their most popular line of footwear, but it's also one of their highest margin products to produce." So it's kind of a multi-factor, almost an exponential amplifier of producing a product they didn't even know their customers wanted, but then also doing it at a margin where they're making great profits off of the cost there for actually producing the item itself.
That's not a conversation you have with an IT department. And I think and the lines between UCaaS and CCaaS, Unified Communications and Contact Center, the lines between Gartner's definition of UCaaS and CCaaS are becoming more and more blurred, right? So Dialpad offers UCaaS and it offers CCaaS, but it's the same platform. It's not like you're going and getting a phone system and going and then getting a contact center platform, right? You're integrated. But so this example that you just gave, right? If you're in a traditional procurement sourcing sales cycle, which, is dominantly controlled by an IT team, right? How would you even surface that kind of, outcome in that selection process, right? Because an IT team isn't necessarily focused on what the, salesperson is doing day to day. Like their job is to make sure that they can get access to the systems that the company has selected, make sure that they're working, and it's not necessarily, selecting features or choosing, it's like it's a little disconnected in that way, right? But saying, hey, here's a use case of a company that was leaking revenue to competitors and was able to use our platform to generate intelligence to go out and actually change their product line to go out and acquire more revenue, but stop leaking that revenue to, and market share. You understand? I'm a little flabbergasted. Like, how do you have that conversation? Like, where does that come up in the source of this? Because like, do you have a DR, and what's your BCDR plans, and are you SOC compliant, and what devices do you run on, and do you have, like that's the talk track that a lot of this stuff gets down to very quickly of like, we still want to use our phones. Can we use our physical phone? Like, it's like, okay, great. The phones work, can we move on and talk about something else? Right. Like how do you seg into that?
Definitely. I think, for me, when I'm talking to an IT, CIO, CTO, what have you, just your everyday IT guy, it's how long does it take you to provision users? How much of your time is spent creating a phone tree or rerouting an IVR? And for me, it's how many applications are you utilizing, right? Is it a separate contact center application and then a UCaaS application that you have to have two sets of login credentials, not just for the end users that you have to provision, but also as the admin, you have to maintain two separate portals. It's a different set of questions, right? I feel like sometimes
I get that line of interaction, but you're selling, at that point you're going down a path of saying, personal pain that exists within the IT department that the rest of the organization doesn't recognize or care about. Right? Like how long does it take you to provision a new phone? Like the sales, the CRO, the CMO, the CO, like they don't care about that. Like this isn't like driving business for, it's, you can get into it from like saying we're trying to improve efficiency or trying to drive down costs, but like that's not like nobody's having a board meeting saying, oh, we've increased the time to provision a phone by 42%, right?
Right. Well, okay, let me take a different angle then. From an IT person's perspective, how often are you resetting passwords or somebody gets locked out and you don't know how to quantify? Maybe we can redirect what kind of internal trainings are happening because these same 5 issues keep coming up all the time because people keep doing the wrong steps with their computers and their personal devices internally, right? That's another aspect of IT. That if there's some sort of internal help desk that they have to call, we can capture that and quantify it to say, okay, the IT team needs to spend less time troubleshooting these things, and here's how much time they're spending currently, right? What can we do to improve the end user experience for the everyday user?
So let's say it's a mid-market company and you've got 2,000 employees. At 2,000 employees, you're probably running, I don't know, I'm hoping that you've got 20 people in IT at that size. Actually, that'd be high. You'd probably be like 12 to 15-ish. It's just kind of like a normal ratio. So thinking about the revenue being generated from a 2,000 person company and the expense of maintaining a 12 to 15 person IT team and department, relative to that revenue or the rest of the operations, is that a selection process that's going into and really changing how a CFO is purchasing a phone system or approving a phone system purchase, right? That organization, it's not the technology infrastructure of that company is reporting into some line of business. Usually it's the finance team, right? And is that IT director or VP coming to the CFO and saying, hey, we're gonna save our ticketing time 15% in order if we implement this thing for our users? What I'm saying is I don't feel like that. To me, it's a fantastic thing to have, but that's not a oh my god, we got to get this system right today, now, holy smokes, stop everything, throw that other thing out, let's go put this into place.
Right. A really interesting way of putting it, but I think you may need to, if it's a CFO you're talking to and you can tell them how much time and effort we can save in IT, I do think that would register. But just being able to quantify it, right, I think is the important piece. I think that would resonate with that CFO, right? Because if it's IT team spending way too much time in the weeds doing repetitive, mundane tasks, that's not what we're paying them for, right? We're trying to make sure that they're maintaining the infrastructure, doing the things that they need to be doing to make sure the company's running in the right way.
This isn't like an anti-IT thing for me. This is just how the organization thinks about this stuff, right? So if we limit this to saying the difference between having some sort of on-prem system that you've probably fully depreciated, or you're in subscription support agreements, you've got a Cisco unified call, you've got a Cisco call manager, you've got a whatever on-premise, right? It's a big forklift. It's a big forklift for a company to go down these paths, right? So I don't see. So my reaction to that, again, in the context of my COO friend from back in the days, I don't see this being we're going to improve your IT department's response time being the driving factor to get off of your phone system when you look at it and you have to then quantify that in terms of a TCO or an ROI evaluation, being we're going to make our IT, what I'm looking for is what is the organization, and I think we get stuck very easy when you're in tech to start talking about the features are so great, or the technology is so cool, or we can do this thing, or we can do that thing. And what gets disconnected really quickly is if you're in tech, you care about this stuff because it's awesome. But if you're not in tech, you're who cares? And so I'm really fascinated and curious about this. Okay, you've given an example of a CCaaS company that was leaking revenue, but so that's specific to CCaaS. How would this fit inside the UCaaS side of the house where people maybe aren't running the line between UCaaS and CCaaS is blurred. Let's talk about that next. But for your vanilla small medium enterprise company that isn't running a contact center, making these decisions and thinking about these things, it's what's the other unlock that they get out of this?
And Dialpad has trademarked a phrase called TrueCast, so having the unified communications and contact center all in one platform. But more than that, even just instant messaging and being able to collaborate on one application instead of having to toggle back and forth between your Drive and your desktop application, and truly trying to put everything in one window. From a Dialpad perspective, the ease of use is something that we take pride in. But being able to do your daily functions of taking and making phone calls, sending messages internally and externally, right? Maybe you're confirming appointments outside the company. I think, confirming appointments, or even just, sending confirmations for ticket numbers and things like that, can all be done from one application. So to me, it's streamlining the amount of systems that some of these individuals are using every day, and not having to have them toggle back and forth between 10 different windows or a bunch of different tabs. Trying to put all that right there on the screen. And we are very much of the idea that you don't have to have it all, right? You don't have to have it all at once. You can sort of work your way up to what you think you need. You don't have to have the full-blown contact center right away, right? If you're happy with your other solution, get your foot in the door with the UCaaS. See how that works. Try that on for size. If it doesn't, no big deal. And then we can go, if you like it, things are going well, you can jump into the whole thing. But
in the Dialpad world, what's the difference between UCaaS and CCaaS?
Great question. And I'll frame this around a question that I get a lot. Being on the channel particularly, I'm talking to partners and they're like, what's your ideal like deal size? And where do you see like the mix? Like what is the mix of contact center and UCaaS? And typically it's that sort of mixed play where you've got maybe it's a 200 employee customer and they've got, a 10 or 20 person call center. I think to your earlier point, the idea of a call center has changed, has evolved over the last 3-4 years, because we're not in these brick and mortar 300 people sitting at in a bunch of cubicles answering the phone anymore. But the mixed play with some UCaaS and then a small CCaaS contact center really is where we do well, just because it gives everybody the best of both worlds, but maintaining that single login for all the users. I'm not sure if I answered that question for you.
In the Dialpad platform, what is the difference between UCaaS and CCaaS? Like, where's the line of functionality or enablements or features or widgets or what?
Yeah, and not to feature dump, because I know we were just talking about that, and it's like, oh, this is cool. But like Dialpad as a platform, you will get transcription and recording regardless of your license type. So you have that data set available to you. This sort of blind spot in a lot of organizations about what are we actually talking about in these, every day. Whether it's a voice call, whether it's a meeting, we will do that across the board.
Let's talk about that for a second. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point. Can you give me an example of that, of actually being used by a company to generate some sort of intelligence around their operations? Because your statement was, what are we even talking about every day? And like, what are we doing?
Not to get too in depth on the features, but there's a thing you can create called moments in Dialpad, where you can create a filter and tag all your competitors to it. So as you're going through you can search through all of your conversations that are happening within the organization. You can stratify permission sets for whose visibility and as a manager, what you can see and things like that. But you can take those conversations and find out how often, internally we're talking about competitors. Who's coming up most this quarter or last quarter? What do we need to do to change our approach in the market to say, okay, well, are we discounting enough? Are our spiffs where they should be? Really trying to understand those conversations, even the internal conversations that are happening.
And this is internal and external. This happens. Mm-hmm. Okay.
You can turn it off if you don't want it on, right? And again, you can stratify how whose calls you want recorded, whose you want transcribed, whose you don't. That's all the admin's role within the organization. But we do it all the time for definitely competitor mentions, discounting. If there's deals that need to be closed, if it's I'm not ready to sign yet, or they kick the can down the road for whatever reason, we have phrasing that we recognize and we pull those reports for the sales team, and then that's a coaching opportunity. Even if it's not a contact center, right? It's just an AE that needs to learn how to close better. Providing that insight to that manager so they can then coach that person the same day instead of having to do it a week later.
Let's rap about this for a moment. So in a traditional sales organization, let's actually make it a little farther. Let's talk about revenue, right? So you have a marketing team, and that marketing team is supposed to be driving awareness and inbound, so MQLs into the business. And in the sales organization, you can either have an SDR, BDR that's attached to marketing or attached to sales, right? So you can, that kind of goes back and forth. But so you'd have this like marketing, BDR, usually to an AE, to then maybe an AM. So, sales development to account executive, salesperson to account manager, relationship, and then you've got maybe you have this handoff into an operations team for delivery, right? So like you've got kind of like this pipeline through this organization. And there's lots of sales enablement tools, right? So you've got Outreach, SalesLoft, you've got Gong and Chorus and all these different things to help give you conversational intelligence on top of like a traditional sales enablement platform, which is really kind of like your BDR and AE specific team. But then that doesn't really get licensed into the AMs or into marketing or into operations. I'm putting all that out there because I think it's important with the point that you just made is Dialpad gives you that functionality across every touch point that you have with a customer. So I'm hearing you say, like, if you've got somebody in your accounting department talking to a customer and the customer saying, so-and-so competitor is giving me this price option and they're having a conversation with finance, that's going to get flagged in your system if you've got that turned on?
Correct. You can set these reports to run, as frequently as you want, whether it's on an individual level, whether it's a team level, whether it's the entire office or we call them offices, but the entire organization, right? You can cast as wide a net as you want to really truly understand, what's being said.
Okay. So that's an interesting little like something you could do that you couldn't do beforehand. So, okay, so we were going back. We were talking about like UCAS versus CCAS. So you're saying that UCAS includes the conversational, moments. You were talking about moments, so being able to capture moments and then report on it.
But where we start to see the contact center build out is more on those features, right? So we start with the baseline of the transcription and the call recording, which are absolutely separate technologies, by the way. So our transcription, our Dialpad AI, as we call it, can be running in a meeting on a phone call, and you don't have to record the call. A lot of the competitors that you were just mentioning are usually dependent upon that call recording, where it'll get sent out, and then it'll process it and send it back to you with the transcript, right? We do it in real time, and we have over 40 billion minutes of conversations, which, I don't know if you could do the math in your head, a little over 7,000 years worth of actual conversational data. Simple questions like, hey, play this song, or add this to my grocery list, actual contextualized business conversations. But where that starts to take the next step is in the contact center license, where we can do screen pops because of a keyword being mentioned. So if I'm in the billing team and I get somebody that calls in asking about a support question, I can put an assist on the screen for that agent to at least help that customer along, even though they called the wrong place. Or if it's a newer agent or somebody that's remote and they don't know how to access things or how to troubleshoot right there on the phone, I can pop something on the screen for them. We call them real-time assists. That will then walk them through that process. So before they automatically escalate to a supervisor or go find their team lead or put the call on hold and go digging through their bookmarks to find something, I can put all that information, including a link to that resource, right there on the screen for them in the contact center space. Some manager functionalities are also different in there, but barge, monitor, whisper, you can message them on the side. Pretty standard call center functionalities. Dialpad's also doing a 12-month campaign for new AI features, and I'm happy to show anybody what those are as they come out. We started in April, and the first one was AI recaps, so generating just a 4-sentence summary, everything that was talked about in a conversation, so you don't have to read through the entire transcript. We're actually leveraging a private instance of ChatGPT for that summarization engine. But then this month's, May's AI release was AI scorecards. So automating the process for the call center manager of setting out the criteria ahead of time. So again, if you're a BDR team or sales development and they have to say these certain things in an order, or they have to read some disclaimer verbatim at the beginning of a call, you can set that on a scorecard. So it automatically, once it's done, it checks it off. And even if you're only getting 40% of your grading, done automatically, that's 40% of your time you're not listening to that call. So you have the rest of that time you have that time back. I know everybody likes to say that these days, especially with online meetings. Oh, we're ending early, I'll give you your time back. But, again, that one resonates with me personally because I used to run a sales development team, and it was pulling those calls, listening to those recordings for hours, and just being able to automate some of that not only would have saved me time, but it would have made me such a much more effective supervisor in that role.
I think the tweak that you want to probably say there, or I would say, is your goal as an SDR manager, right, is to make your team more efficient so that way they can drive more revenue for the business. So if I'm playing my like hostile like COO guy role, right, I think your pitch to me would be more along the lines of your sales managers can get more, can make your new hires in your sales team more efficient faster, or like selling, that's. So like, okay, you can't like quantify it, right? Would probably be my follow-up to that, which would probably be pretty, I don't know if you could quantify it or not, but you could demonstrate it and say, hey, look, this is what we see on our stats. I've seen case studies and use cases. There was one that actually really surprised me, and this is a while ago, but it was an auto dealership that had converted over to Dialpad. Do you know this case study? And they were talking about it was specifically related to marketing intelligence. And it triggered in my mind because of what you were talking around, like conversational intelligence of people just calling in, and it was, if memory serves, it was wrapping back up into like what their marketing departments are doing in terms of advertising and then service and service repairs and all these other revenue touch points that they were getting with their customers.
So there's a couple things we can do in that regard. Car dealerships, as we know, are extremely dependent upon surveys, right? They almost always ask you to fill out, no matter what you're doing with them, whether it's in the service department, whether it's the sales guy that got you the car. We can actually automate the CSAT scores that they want to send out. So we obviously still do the touch tone 1 through 5. That's pretty standard, I think, across the board. But we found that the data that is driven from those is, number one, skewed extremely negatively, and then also that the participation rate is extremely low. So not only are you getting low participation rates, you're also getting very skewed scores. So we're able to quantify, those conversations and grade those in real time as they happen based on what was actually said in that call. So from a customer service perspective, being able to understand the end user customer experience pretty rapidly by automatically scoring a call based on the interaction itself is something that we rolled out a year and a half ago, and found it to be great success, honestly. And think of it like, I know we don't think of it as a call center, but most car dealerships have people that are calling outbound and prospecting, or people that call in because they are responding to a lead or some kind of campaign that's been put out there. Not only can we capture what number they called, so that way we can tie it back to that specific campaign or whatever the outbounding was. We can then also understand that entire customer journey as they go through that process. Is that the use case you were talking about?
Yeah. So I mean, okay, customer journeys are interesting. You can generate customer activity either by calling. So you have a classic SDR function, people cold calling, or you can be marketing and to new customers, prospects, or to existing customers, right, for them to call in. When you start talking about capturing that customer journey end to end, what's an example of intelligence or enhancement? What's the word I'm looking for here? It's like, oh, we had this, previously this is how we did it and we didn't have this, and now we do it this way and we have this other thing which is awesome for us.
Sure. Self-service, I find is a hot topic in that regard. Being able to find your own answers. We all have been victim of the chatbot that goes in circles and doesn't help you. But what if you apply another layer of intelligence that can not only remember what a good answer was? So if I ask the question, it gives me the right answer, I go on my way. But then when you call in, Max, or you message in, remembers what it gave me as an answer. And then it populates that because it got a good response, or the chat ended because I found what I was looking for. Being able to see the things that the customers have asked questions about before through a true omni-channel experience. So one of the campaigns could be a Facebook, messaging or Facebook ad that runs out there. We can capture that when they message in over Facebook. Say, hey, I saw the ad, and then capture everything that they've talked about in a single pane for whether the different ways that they've interacted, whether it is via the web bot, whether it's a social media platform, whether it's an email campaign. You can see the entire customer journey. So as an agent, I'm not asking this person, hey, how did you hear about us? I already know when they contact us, regardless of what form it is. Customer journeys, I love seeing this stuff get automated and then also just populated for the agent. It's just the context that it provides to be able to have that better conversation and also get that person, when they decide to escalate to a real live agent, getting them to their destination more quickly and more efficiently, because you're not going in circles constantly.
Big issue with, you talk about virtual agents, and chatbots and things like this is programming them. Historically, you have to go through and somebody has to program that chatbot with potential inputs and outputs. And then, there's an inference engine that can then apply it. And then depending on how sophisticated the thing is. And now with LLMs coming on the market, I'm imagining these things are going to start getting really sophisticated really quickly. But within the Dialpad world, how are you, if you were either building out agent assist, from a pop-up, and I mean, this isn't like an instant thing. Let's say, Dialpad is running within a company for 6 months and you've captured, I don't know, some number of calls, 10,000 phone calls, 10,000 interactions. Is there a way for the customer to start seeing that and seeing those patterns and auto create stuff based on pattern that's Dialpad's capturing? How sophisticated has this AI and this reporting gotten to the point of it being like, hey, we looked at this and we read through the last quarter's worth of phone calls transcriptions, and this is your fill in the blank top X items, and here's how and solve this first one first, or program it or change it or publish it or add it to your IVR or do whatever the thing is, and then be able to work down that list and actually have kind of like a guided direction.
So I would say there is going to be some lift up front. Absolutely. I mean, I think that, and like you even just changing out desk phones, right? There's going to be a little bit of a lift when, we get started. And, but most companies that we've worked with who decide to go with the real-time assists or, provide those cards, they've already got a 3-ring binder that has every SKU imaginable in it. And those SKUs exist somewhere in a document. So at that point, all you're doing is copying and pasting, right? The configuration of these things is not coding. You're not having to go in and learn how to Python, code this interaction into the database. You're literally copying and pasting what you want it to say, adding the attributes, whether it's the the SKU number, some nickname for that particular product or the product name itself, and you hit save and you apply it to the team that you want to see it, on there. Now, I will say, going forward, we are attempting to automate those processes as well to the exact use case that you were talking about, where over a quarter we've seen these trends, or this is the most common word that we've seen come up, so this is important. We do have word maps that absolutely show you that information, but then you have to go and take that and make the decision on how to change the real-time assist guard, or update the talk track, or the way that the self-service bot is configured, because we can do those static if-then statements, right? Are you looking for this? Yes. Okay, here's your options, right? That's pretty standard. But the really cool thing about our AI self-service is that it has the ability to scan multiple sources of unstructured data. So you can point it at a 100-page PDF, and you don't have to say, I want you to pull the answer from paragraph 3 on page 5. Like, it will go find that and then populate it for you. So there is some self-learning and self-correction that happens as it continues to learn. Skynet's not self-aware yet, but we're getting close.
Is Dialpad doing, this is, you're talking about like from the self-service bot. Are you doing voice interactions, or is this all text?
So the self-service bot itself is text, right? But we do have the automated IVR workflows for, tell me why you're calling today. I want to speak with a pharmacist, or, whatever. There is that component to it as well. And even from the chatbot, you can escalate to a voice call if that was something that you were wanting to do.
Should I be expecting to hear some announcements soon of, Dialpad has gone to, and leveraging GCP's Dialogflow or your own engine to actually make, a voice-based IVA?
That may be above my pay grade. However, I would say that that's sort of the direction we're headed. Our development team, we put 40% of every dollar back into R&D. Because we feel like we're at that hockey stick moment, right, where this is it's even in the last 6 months with ChatGPT, right? AI, everybody's talking about it, and we're in such a unique position to be able to continue to enhance these features that I think something like that is very much in the realm of possibilities.
So now you have to exist inside of an ecosystem that's not, this isn't like, what's what I'm looking for? Organizations are going to have some sort of productivity suite. They're going to be, for all intents and purposes, they're either going to be on Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. And Teams has sucked a lot of the air out of the room from a, text collaboration, meetings, and, their voice platforms. We can get into an argument about whether or not Teams voice is good or bad. That's not really the issue. And Microsoft's plans around direct routing and Orchestrator Connect and everything else that they're doing. Workspace is a more interesting anomaly. I feel like they're finally pushing and trying to figure out chat. But, Slack exists because Google didn't have a chat thing that worked. And Google Meet has been pushing hard, so now Google's actually working to create a really good video product as well. So these are two areas that were very core inside of the UCaaS experience and inside of Dialpad, right? You've got your own video meetings tool, and you've got both a ability to SMS and chat externally as well as chat internally. And how do you guys coexist with these other platforms at this point? What is what are customers really doing here? Do Microsoft customers abandon Teams because they want to use Dialpad for everything instead, or do you have to figure out how to cohabitate? And then what happens with your meeting platform, because all your fun AI stuff runs on top of your meetings and not on top of Microsoft Teams meetings or Google Workspace, or fill in the blanks?
Yeah, definitely. So we just off the bat, we do have full integrations with both Office 365 and Google Workspace. So pulling in calendar events and Active Directory syncing with both platforms, so those contacts are pulled in at the same time. You're not recreating them within two different platforms. Being able to sync that data absolutely goes hand in hand with what Dialpad can offer. But no, absolutely. Teams is a huge one, and we have the direct routing integration. We have a secondary integration that should be released by the end of this year. But being able to pull in those functions, and you're absolutely right that the meetings platform is a struggle because we can pull in the messaging and the phone calls, but Microsoft obviously didn't want us bringing our own meetings platform into their instance. But I've seen it go both ways too, because I've been on a call with a CEO who saw the full suite of Dialpad and said, why are we on Teams? Dialpad can do everything and more than Teams can, because we get all the data and the analytics right here within the application itself. But then I've also, there's a lot of customers that are very much, they dig their heels in because they've invested so much in the Office 365 suite that they're like, hey, Dialpad Contact Center is going to be standalone on the side, but everything else we're doing is going to be within Microsoft Teams. So it's going to go both ways, and it really just depends on the need of the organization. Because if you're doing direct routing, there's licensing costs that are involved in that because you have to have the specific license types to be able to enact that. And if you're talking about a handful of users, maybe that's not a big deal. But if you're talking about an entire organization, maybe it does make sense to move over to Dialpad. It just kind of depends.
So going back to like our earlier thing we were talking about, and you were bringing up IT efficiency, right? So a big push for Microsoft Teams specifically is just IT efficiency. We've already got this application. It gets bundled with every install that we do. It's already on the desktop. We don't have to do anything
for
to
now,
enable it,
right?
Okay, fine. We can talk about it.
No, it's okay.
The power of the bundle is pretty significant. And let's see, I mean, even if the EU forces Microsoft to debundle Teams, I don't think that they could force Microsoft to charge people to use Teams. They would just have to install it separately, right? So Teams gets removed from the 365 like Office bundle, but it's still free for an organization to use, and it's going to still deeply integrate with SharePoint and everything else that 365 is doing. And you just have to deploy it with your Intune instance anyways. You're like, okay, we're install Word and install Teams. We'll see. We'll see what the EU does with this one, but I'm sure there's lots of people that would love for something to happen there. But anyway, so that like push to like IT efficiency, that is a big push with Teams. Like, it's not a cost driver. By the way, if you don't know this, Teams is expensive, right? So voice enabling Teams and doing meetings in Teams, it's not cheap. Like, it is expensive. It's not. There's cheaper options out there if you're trying to optimize for cost. Teams is probably not where you want to go. But it has the whole, we already have it on, it's already running everywhere. We don't have to do anything. It's easy for our IT team to manage from a single console, in theory. You still have to do a bunch of PowerShell and all this other fun stuff. I feel like the more I've pushed you on some of these things, the more that's come back to it, which is exposing and being able to report and provide analytics and kind of like opening up this other untapped element of data that people don't currently have. Like, nobody's profiling their Slack instance for conversations inside of their company for what's actually going on. Nobody's doing that for Teams. There's DLP tools looking for people trying to like exfiltrate stuff they shouldn't, but it's not like this is what your company's talking about. I find that very kind of interesting here of like, why should you care about doing something and running a Dialpad or running, UCAS, XCAS, CCAS, TrueCAS, BlockCAS, right? As a platform. Couldn't help it. I don't know, like it's like, so that's interesting to me. It's like all of a sudden you say, hey, business leader, do you know what your people are talking about? Not like in a creepy I'm going to spy on everybody way, but like, what's going on with the market? What are customers asking for you? What are they saying? I'm assuming you guys, I think actually I know the answer to this question. You guys do sentiment analysis. Is that in just the CCAS, or you get that in the UCAS side of the house as well?
UCAS and CCAS have the
really?
Sentiment analysis. Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So if somebody calls up and is just like calling an extension in your office like randomly and like starts like swearing at the person, you're going to be able to flag like something happened here.
Absolutely. And I think, even to that end, you asked the question around like how many, nobody's really running these reports. Nobody's really doing this. To me, it's always been a blind spot in these, regardless of the, whatever the organization is. Being able to understand the call habits of a rep that's calling into an IVR and they only hit the IVR and then they hang up. Typical call center, or typical, even just on the UCAS side, before that, it was just peg counts and timers, right? You knew how many and how long. Well, what did that person actually do when they got to the menu? Did they hang up and then say, yeah, I made 100 dials today, but they were all 10 seconds long? Being able to understand that's a coaching opportunity. And even if
No, keep going. I'm just like now I'm churning. Now we're onto something here, Dan. Like this is getting interesting.
And now I want to tie this back to sort of the conversation around the training element, but then also, how do you talk to somebody internally, regardless of title? If you can train someone up or train them out because you understand their habits, because they're not taking the coaching, think about it now. You hire somebody, you give them a 6-month runway to figure it out, and then you put them on a PIP because after that they're not performing. You give them another 3 months to get the 90-day PIP going and figure that out. You've wasted almost a year trying to get that person up to speed. But if we can shorten that cycle, give them the tools they need, and you're making a decision within the first 6 months as opposed to the first year, you're saving that company X number of dollars for that new hire. And maybe I misrepresented the story, but that's one of my reps always likes to tell.
there's a certain thing that I see with especially with the work from home and remote, where it was like, oh, we have to monitor and keep track of what's going on with our people. And I hate that. I'm not a fan for this. I'm not trying to say like do screenshots of people's desktops and like monitor them, because I mean, again, you have to go back and like figure, like what are you doing? Like, just don't do this. There's better ways to like score and measure productivity. But what you just said that really was fascinating to me, that really triggered a thought process for me more than anything else, was like, organizations scale by identifying, creating lines of business, creating processes, understanding an input and an output, hiring people to do the in-between of that, right? And whatever function it is, right? I'm gonna get cream for this one because I'm distilling people into like robots, right? But then as you scale that company and that organization, right, you have absolutely no idea what's actually going on, right? So it takes a long time to build goodwill and a relationship with a customer, and it takes one interaction to kill it. And so you start thinking about it, it's like, well, every time a person from inside of your company is on the phone call with an external anybody, customer, vendor, government, agency, like whatever it is, like what's actually going on there? And not from a creepy way of being able to like surveil everything that's happening inside of your company, but more along the lines of, something really went sideways on this phone call, and like maybe you should know what it is. I mean, that sounds like a really interesting piece of mind conversation. Like, hey COO, you don't care about your phones, but would you care if your foreman is cussing out a $50 million customer? Maybe that would be interesting for you.
Definitely. And the way that I like to think about it is the customer experience starts with your internal user's experience. And if they have 20 windows open and they gotta find different information over here and over there, it's gonna be a longer phone call. It's probably gonna be a follow-up or a second call resolution as opposed to that first call resolution. Truly believing internally here at Dialpad also that the customer experience starts with our individual, because if we're not doing our job, it's a poor experience for the outside customer as well. So I think that's extremely relevant to the use case you just said as well, like just making sure that we're providing the standard of care and quality that our customers expect. Being able to quantify that, right? Brand is extremely important, to any organization. We know the big behemoths out there in the world. When you get your coffee, when you order something online, like there's a certain service level that we're all accustomed to with those different organizations. And it's like, if you have an off-brand experience, you tweet at them, or you fill out a survey and they give you rewards points, or they sent you something else because it was that bad. It's that important to them that the end user experience is good. And I think spot on with that executive to say, like, this is what your foreman's doing. How does that reflect on the brand? How does that help your organization as a whole, or how does it hurt it? I think that's I'm gonna have to steal that, because I think that's extremely important.
What other information are you gleaning out of data, within this platform, right? We've talked about it in terms of like, agent assist and cards popping up of like, this caller is calling about this thing, and like, here's an answer to the question before you have to go look for it. Talked a little bit about programming chatbots. You've alluded a little bit into, ChatGPT and driving these interactions. But like, what other like examples? I mean, because you think phone system, and everybody immediately goes to like a CDR. Like, I want to know who called who, when, and how long the call was. But that doesn't really, CDRs don't tell you anything. They're just like it's literally a billing record, right? So things of data and analytics, have you seen people use, or you wouldn't immediately think about and go to?
So my sales reps are traveling constantly. They're on the road. I have one sales rep that will drive anywhere under 10 hours. He's unreal. But he's constantly on meetings in the car, and he has to be hands-free. So being able to host his meeting and not have to pull over and take notes because the transcript is running. So if he says, oh, you know what, I'm on the road, when I get to the hotel, I'll send you that information, tags it as an action item, puts it on his profile, so that way when he gets the summary, not only does he have the entire conversation summarized in 4 to 5 sentences, he's got a list of action items that he can complete or send out to the rest of the callers to say, hey, Dan, you said you were going to follow up with some technical documents. I'm going to send him a quote. Let's get this done. So when he's stationary, he's got all that stuff right there for him. So that's our Dialpad meetings platform. I mean, he's on, like I said, he's on the road constantly. So being able to do that hands-free, not have to worry about missing notes, right? It's a valuable tool that we use internally all the time.
That's a fun one.
Right?
Yeah, this is different, right? We're not having a speeds and speeds conversation here, right? This isn't like, I'm hoping at this point that Dialpad can make and receive phone calls and have voicemail. So like, I want to talk about that.
Table stakes, right? I mean, yeah. And that's the thing. It's trying to find those things that people need that they haven't thought about yet. That they're just kind of used to doing things a certain way, and how can we make it easier for them and accessible? being able to access your own call recordings and transcripts to find out, oh, you know what, that call didn't go quite well. Let me go review that myself, instead of having to wait for somebody to point it out to you. Giving you the tools to do these things.
Somebody replacing a phone system and looking for the cheapest option to replace a phone system is very different from telling them, I can help your sales team be more efficient and do these things that you can't do today. I can help you scale customer interactions and preserving your brand, right? Like that's an interesting non-technical outcome that people care about.
Absolutely. And honestly, we'll just qualify a deal. I mean, if somebody's just looking for dial tone, we're most likely not going to be the right fit for them, right? And we'll tell them that, because I used to work for a telco that did POTS lines. Go get a POTS line. If that's all you need, get some copper, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you later. And there's some people, there's businesses that can run that way, and that's fine. And we're not a fit. It's really the outcomes that people are looking for that's where we want to deliver, because it provides the value, it provides the monetary implications for them. Trying to wrap our heads around where we're going and what they need next.
So this is a feature question. I'm not sure if Dialpad does this or not, but something I saw recently, and it was actually I had two experiences recently that were really surprising to me. One was I'd called into a company and went through a phone tree, and then ended up being directed to voicemail, and I hung up the call, and I got a call back in a couple minutes with hey, I'm returning your phone call. And it wasn't like I'd called into an individual person's voicemail. And so it was surprising me, because the company, this I wasn't expecting this organization to have nobody's ever called me back when I've hung up the call, calling into any company ever before, ever. So that one was shocking to me. And then the second one, it wasn't like I had called and a person she had missed the call and called me back from her cell phone or something. It was you could tell it was actually integrated into the system. So that was pretty cool. So is there an option to do something like that with Dialpad?
Yeah. So I place test calls into my system all the time. So that's what I do. I demo all day long. And if I dial it and I hang up, as long as it hits the menu, it will show as a missed call. You can set the parameters for how long a missed call actually is, right? Anything over the internet is going to take a second or two, because you got to make the three-way handshake, right, for the connection. But yeah, we can absolutely do that. And then if you leave a voicemail, or if you hit the voicemail, it's going to show as a missed call because somebody didn't answer it.
So that's still manual driven. I mean, there's what was the feature in most contact centers? Virtual hold, my favorite thing of all time. You don't have to wait in queue. You can just press the button. We'll call you back when it's your turn. Can you insert missed calls into virtual holds?
That I don't know that off the top of my head. I want to say yes, but I don't want to speak out of turn. I'd have to look at that.
So the other one I'm starting to see now, and I've seen this in a few places, where you call and maybe it's after hours, office is closed, they don't answer the call, whatever, and an automated text message comes back. Sorry, we missed your call. And it's not person driven. This was an absolutely 100% automated, with a kind of a menu prompt, almost like a chatbot of directions, hours, some basic stuff in the initial message, but then additional information to get more details out of them. Is this, also, you talk about interactions with Facebook Messenger and these different things. Can you, is this something that you're supporting, you can roll out and you can start talking about? Because this goes back again to just capturing. It's so hard to get somebody to call you as a business, and you don't want to lose them when they finally do.
So first things first, we can do the automated callback if you opt into it. So I just want to clear the air on that one. Now, if somebody hangs up before that gets there, I don't know about that. I got it down on if we were on a Dialpad meeting, I'd have a action item to follow up with you. But the automated text, thank you for calling. It's it's after hours, or nobody's available. Yes, automate that text message, send out. They can reply to it, and that text will then go to that main line of that call center or that department or that UCaaS user, depending on what level wherever they called. But yeah, then from there you're still gathering more information, right? And I think if I just hung up and it said, if I dialed in and it says it's after hours and it automatically sends me a text message and I'm still looking at my phone, I'm going to reply to that text message and say, oh, here's the information you're asking for.
Is that something that's built into the CCaaS side of the house, or is that available also on the UCaaS side of the house?
It's available on the UCaaS and the CCaaS, because I can set that on my personal number as well to say, here's my automatic text message after hours, here's my boss's number, or here's the guy that's on the West Coast. Whatever that looks like, I can go ahead and I can populate that information to go when my working hours are over.
I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm going to give you a situation, and I think I know the answer to this one, but I want to hear it from you directly. I know a guy who runs public storage. He's got a lot of self-storage facilities. It's not public storage, but it's self-storage facilities. And basically there was a conversation about how he discovered that his his team, his staff, so they spend a lot of money in marketing to get people to come rent storage units from them. So billboards, advertising, Google, whatever it is, right? So there's a significant amount of advertising that goes out into getting people to come in and rent these things. They try to automate as much of the process. You can go to the website and you can rent by yourself, yada, yada, yada. But there's a lot of scenarios where you end up calling and you speak to a person. And what he discovered by accident was people were calling in to rent units in facilities, and that unit was unavailable. It's like, oh, we want to rent an 8x8. Oh, we don't have any 8x8s. And his employees were not saying, but we could give you a 10x8. We've got these 7x9s available, or whatever these variations were. And so he discovered this, and his response to it, of course, was like, extreme concern, we'll use that phrase, and started recording every single phone call that was going into these phone numbers for that were being answered by his team, and started listening to every single call to do. And it was a coaching driven activity, but like, now I don't know what I don't know, and I need to know what I don't know, and I got to listen to all these phone calls. And I'm hoping he was listening to them sped up and not just like wasting his life, because this guy had much more valuable things to be doing with his time. So if you were at a dinner table and you heard somebody say this to you, or you heard somebody talking about this, what is and you put your Dialpad hat on, like, paint a picture of a different world and how this works differently with Dialpad.
Sure. So I would start asking him questions around how much time and effort goes into that particular activity, because I want to hear one of the tips I got early in my sales career was ask somebody what's going well, because inevitably they'll tell you like one or two things that are, and then they'll tell you three things that aren't. Be like, oh, but this could be better, and you get the conversation started, and you start to understand what their problems are without asking them what their problems are, because they'll start telling you things even just voluntarily because you're asking them about the positives, and then inevitably something negative will come up. So I would start asking, just questions around, first of all, how much time that's taking him, and then what it would mean to him if he could ramp those individuals up or provide suggestions in real time to save that conversation or save that customer from going somewhere else where they have 8x8s available. That's how I would do it. Because then he would say, oh, well, that'd be great, but how do we do that? And I could say, oh, well, I can show you. But then you can also, see in the contact center space, or even in your UCaaS space, being able to see like a stack ranking of who's talking for how long, what are the sentiment trends, right? The up and downs of the week, being able to see that information. So you can make decisions on, again, coaching up or coaching out, right? If you need to get rid of somebody and get somebody better suited in there, what kind of value would that bring to your organization to know that you got 4 rock stars here that just need a little push, right? And giving that real-time assist or giving them more consistent feedback, what kind of a difference would that make? That's my answer.
So he had a very fundamentally core vision, issue, right? So he had his core issue was he was losing revenue. Mm-hmm. And then there was like, what was the root cause of losing revenue? But like really the issue here is what he was looking at is, in the real estate space, the valuation of your properties is based on operating income, right? So how much revenue do you have coming in the door, like has massive swings in terms of what the value of the asset becomes. So his basic problem was that he was losing revenue. He was spending money on marketing and he wasn't capturing the revenue that he was spending the money on marketing for, and didn't have a way of quantify how much money he was actually losing. So there was this fear around the perception of, I'm losing an unknown amount of money, but I know I'm losing money. And how much money are we actually losing here? Like, what is the actual impact to the business and the asset? And like from that fork, there's like 2 things that you solve in technology, right? We talked about with Dialpad. The first thing that you solve is like, can you give that agent a prompt when somebody calls in and says, are there 8x8s available? And they're saying, no, there's no 8x8s, 8x8 available, or 10x10s or 20x20s or whatever it is. You're talking about using an agent assist and prompting that agent to say, but wait, there's more. You could have this other thing instead, right? Agent assist. Or 2, actually giving him analytics and sentiment, which says, this is what happened with these calls, and this was the disposition of the call. Person called in, they got what they needed, they didn't get what they needed, they leased a unit, they didn't lease a unit, and what is that actual analytical trend of it, right? So capture more revenue, make your agents more efficient, training opportunity live, but also actually being able to quantify and say, what the heck is going on with all these calls? Because you can't listen to 500 calls a week. Like, it's just not going to happen for them.
Yeah. So, and I love this use case. I think it's extremely relevant, and Dialpad does have a place in this example. The next 2 AI features that we're releasing are called AI Playbooks and AI Coaching Hub. AI Playbooks is a talk track generate an AI generated talk track that shows up on the screen. So instead of just having the real-time assists, which are great, the next best action for this call. So to that example, if 8x8s are gone, okay, well, we don't have any of those left. Okay, then what? Pop the next line item on that particular screen or the side panel that says try a 7x9, try a 10x11 or 10x10, whatever that looks like. So that next best action that's appearing right there live for that agent. And then the coaching hub is how you take all of his information and present it to the coach, to the manager of that group, to say, this is who's performing well, this is the sentiment trends, these are the most common phrases, these are the call outcomes, these are the most common outcomes, these are all the dispositions. Centralizing that into a hub for the coach to say, even just to report to their supervisor, this is how we're trending, this is what we're doing, right? Use case fell right into my lap because that's exactly where we're going the next 2 months.
Can you do this both on inbound and outbound? Because you have an outbound, so this is the same thing. So if you're doing outbound prospecting, you get this data, you can surface these things, you can do assists, you can do, eventually you'll be able to, so playbooks are available outbound, playbooks are available. And now this is cool. Okay, took us a little while to get here, Dan, but this isn't a phone system. This is a make more money for your business system, right? Like it's
you can't fit that on a card. You can't put that on a billboard, though. Right?
Yeah. It's not very elegant, right? You need something a little more elegant.
We'll have to refine it.
We'll come up with something. I'll trademark it, and we'll
sell it back to me.
Yeah, I'll sell it to Craig. So this is actually okay. So now this gets very interesting because now we're talking about like capturing data and analytics internally and externally to then figure out what is actually going on. Not like this subjective, we think this is happening, but what's actually really happening. Being able to do sentiment analysis against that. Are people happy? Are they not happy? Was the call good? Was the call bad? Are we offering upsells? Do we not? Are we prompting, things like we're having this problem? This is those are more fun conversations. See, we've gotten to the business side of stuff. It took us a little bit, but we got there. So let's go back to my first thing, right? We're talking, and I'm a grumpy COO, and I say I don't care about my phones, right? Well, your follow up would be something more along the lines of, well, do you care about making more money? Probably not that hostile. That's a really probably not wise kind of response. All right.
Depends on the persona, but yeah.
If I'm a grouchy, construction COO, maybe that is the appropriate response. Very interesting. Okay. What else is on the roadmap for, have you announced how much of this AI roadmap has been announced? Like how much, it seems like to a certain degree, I'm sure I'll be surprised, but like in terms of like features, there's only so many features you can introduce to a phone system. At that point, it starts talking about like how you use those features and how you use the data and what the analytics, and now in your case, like AI and how you can enable more things out of this AI engine, right?
Yeah. So officially, the 4 that I've mentioned, the AI recaps, the AI scorecards, the coaching hub, and the playbooks, those are the 4 that have been released. Now they've given us a couple others that they don't have due dates yet, so they haven't really told us like when we can talk about them yet, but I have a feeling, given that our third one's going to be released here in the next 10 days or so, before the end of June, that they'll have to tell us something because everybody keeps asking me that same question. Okay, what's next? What's happening? Like, what can we talk about? But no, I think, and it may not even be an internal feature enhancement, right? It could be another leveraging of the third party to make more out of the data or make it more concise. Or, we have this plethora of information with our number of analyzed minutes, but like, what can we do with that to provide better outcomes and help customers make more money, right? To tie it kind of all back together. But yeah,
I would love it if you guys released some sort of agent bot integration. I don't know what the proper terminology is. So when somebody sends me a Teams or a Zoom or a WebEx or endless variation of different meetings, that data could be captured for me out of those meetings as well to like one place. I didn't have it in 15 different places. Because as much as I try to control like what video conferencing platform I'm on, just for my own sanity, like, it's each I could be on 8 in one day. Like it's no joke.
Yeah, and that's kind of I would say the one drawback, right? We don't lay over onto a bunch of other technologies, right? The Dialpad AI is proprietary, but
that's my official feature request. Tell them to figure out how to do it.
You're not the only one, but
great.
But yeah, no, it's gonna stay within the Dialpad meetings platform, and that maybe is some of the allure to it, right? To get people to come over. But
Dan, any last words? Anything we haven't touched on that you think we should talk about and get into, or something that we glossed over that we should probably spend some time on.
You can't spell Dialpad without AI. Somebody dropped that on a...
Although it's backwards, but it's good.
It is backwards. It is backwards. So it is not Dialpad. It's Dialpad. But no, somebody dropped that in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and I've just it's great to see people's eyes roll when I say it. But
it's the perfect dad joke if you're in tech. It's just so funny.
But no, I mean, just Dialpad truly thinks of itself as an AI data company who happens to work in the telephony and communication space. So
for now. Soon to take over the world when Skynet activates.
Right.
All right, Dan.
Enjoyed this conversation.